The restaurant became so quiet that Dylan could hear the rain sliding down the windows. Elena sat across from him with tears filling her eyes while her hands shook around a tiny photo. Only minutes earlier, the night had felt perfect. Soft music. Warm lights. Easy laughter. The kind of night Dylan thought no longer existed for people like him. Then Elena whispered 5 words that changed everything. "I'm raising him alone too." Dylan stared at the little boy in the photo. Something inside his chest tightened immediately. Because he knew that lonely look in the child's eyes. He saw it every morning in his own daughter. Elena quickly wiped her face and looked away. "I should have told you earlier." Dylan said nothing. Not because he was angry. Because suddenly the woman who seemed calm and confident looked just as broken as he felt inside. And sitting there in that restaurant, Dylan realized this date was no longer about romance. It was about 2 exhausted parents hiding the same painful secret. Before we go deeper into this case, take a second and hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. 3 years earlier, Dylan Matthew lost the version of himself that used to laugh easily. Since his wife passed away, life became a routine of survival. Wake up early. Pack lunches. Get Haley ready for school. Rush to work. Come home exhausted. Repeat. His apartment always felt too quiet at night. Sometimes Dylan sat at the kitchen table staring at unpaid bills while Haley slept in the next room. She was only 8 years old. Still sweet. Still hopeful. But smart enough to notice when her father looked tired. One night she walked into the kitchen and found Dylan rubbing his eyes beside a pile of overdue notices. "Are we okay?" she asked softly. Dylan forced a smile immediately. "Of course we are." But Haley kept staring at him. Children always knew when adults were pretending. Dylan worked maintenance at a downtown office building. The pay covered basics. Barely. Some weeks he skipped meals so Haley could have what she needed. Still, he never complained publicly. At work, Mason Butler noticed everything anyway. Mason was loud, funny, and impossible to ignore. He constantly tried pulling Dylan out of isolation. "You need a life again," Mason told him during lunch one afternoon. "I have a life." "No," Mason replied. "You have responsibilities." That sentence stayed in Dylan's head all day. The truth hurt because it was real. Dylan loved Haley deeply. But somewhere along the way, he stopped thinking of himself as a man with dreams. He only saw himself as a tired father trying not to fail. Every evening followed the same pattern. Homework at the kitchen table. Microwave dinners. Laundry running in the background. Then silence after Haley went to sleep. That silence was the hardest part. Sometimes Dylan stared at old family pictures until midnight. He missed simple things. Holding someone. Laughing naturally. Feeling understood. But dating felt impossible. Who would want a grieving single father carrying emotional scars and financial stress? Then Mason changed everything. One Friday afternoon, Mason walked into the maintenance room smiling. "You're going on a date tomorrow." Dylan nearly dropped his wrench. "No chance." "She already agreed." "Mason. I'm serious." The woman's name was Elena Bracey. Mason knew her through Claudia Harris. According to Mason, Elena was smart, caring, and somehow still single. Dylan almost canceled 3 times. The night of the date, he stood nervously in front of the mirror adjusting his tie while Haley watched from the bed. "You look scared." She giggled. "I am scared." Haley smiled softly. "Mom would still want you to be happy." Dylan looked down immediately. That simple sentence hit him hard. Before leaving, he kissed Haley on the forehead. Then he drove to the restaurant with his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had no idea that one dinner was about to change his entire life. Before we continue, share your thoughts below. If you were Dylan, after years of grief and loneliness, would you risk opening your heart again? Elena Bracey looked even more beautiful than Dylan expected. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just calm. Warm. Comfortable. The kind of person who made tension disappear without trying. When she smiled at him for the first time, Dylan felt his nerves slowly settle. Dinner started awkwardly. Small talk. Funny work stories. Comments about terrible coffee and crowded traffic. But after a while, conversation became natural. Easy. For the first time in years, Dylan laughed without forcing it. Elena noticed immediately. There it is, she said softly. What? Your real smile. Dylan looked embarrassed. I forgot I still had one. Elena's eyes softened at that answer. Something about her expression felt familiar. Not pity. Understanding. As the night continued, they opened up more. Favorite movies. Childhood memories. Dream vacations they would probably never afford. Then Elena asked quietly, Do you have family? Dylan hesitated. My daughter. Elena smiled warmly. How old is she? 8. That's a sweet age. Dylan nodded. Then his expression changed slightly. She lost her mother 3 years ago. Elena lowered her eyes immediately. I'm sorry, she whispered. Dylan expected awkward silence after that. Instead, Elena reached across the table and gently touched his hand. The small gesture almost broke him emotionally. Because he could not remember the last time somebody looked at him with genuine compassion. For a moment, the world outside the restaurant disappeared. The date felt perfect. Safe. Hopeful. Then everything shifted. Dylan excused himself to the restroom. When he returned, he saw Elena outside near the entrance arguing quietly on the phone. Her voice sounded panicked. Please don't leave him alone. Dylan stopped walking. Elena turned and noticed him watching. Her face immediately went pale. She ended the call quickly. I'm sorry, she whispered. It's complicated. Back at the table, the mood changed. Elena kept checking her phone nervously. Her hands trembled slightly. Dylan finally asked, Is everything okay? She forced a smile. Yeah. But Dylan knew she was lying. Minutes later, a waiter accidentally bumped their table. Elena's purse slipped onto the floor. Crayons spilled out first. Then a toy car. Then a folded drawing made by a child. The noise in the restaurant suddenly felt distant. Elena froze. Dylan slowly picked up the drawing. It showed a woman and a little boy holding hands beneath stars. Across the top were uneven blue letters. I love you, Mom. Elena grabbed the paper quickly. I can explain. Dylan stared quietly. Because suddenly everything made sense. The nervous phone call. The tired eyes. The emotional distance behind her smile. You have a child, he said softly. Elena looked down. Yes. The silence between them became heavy. I should have told you earlier. Why didn't you? Elena swallowed hard. Because men usually leave once they hear the truth. That sentence hit Dylan harder than she realized. After a long pause, Elena finally reached into her purse again and pulled out a tiny photo. A little boy with dark curls stared sadly into the camera. Elena's voice cracked. My son's name is Luke. Then tears filled her eyes as she whispered the words Dylan never expected to hear. I'm doing this alone too. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. What part of the story has hit you the hardest so far? Share your thoughts below because moments like this feel painfully real for so many parents. Dylan drove home confused and emotional. Part of him understood Elena immediately. Another part felt hurt she hid something so important. By the time he reached home, Haley was asleep on the couch holding one of his hoodies. Dylan carried her gently to bed. As he tucked her in, guilt washed over him. Because another woman had entered his heart for the first time since losing his wife. That terrified him. The next morning Elena sent a message. I'm sorry if I ruined everything. Dylan stared at the phone for a long time before replying. You didn't ruin it. But things still felt complicated. At work, Mason noticed Dylan acting distracted. So? How'd the dream date go? Dylan sighed heavily. She has a son. Mason blinked. And? She hid it. Mason leaned against the wall. Maybe she was scared. Dylan looked away quietly. Because deep down, he knew Mason was right. Meanwhile, Elena sat in her apartment watching Luke color silently at the kitchen table. Luke was 6 years old. Quiet. Sensitive. And deeply afraid of being abandoned again. Ever since Felton Bracey walked out, Luke became terrified whenever Elena left the room too long. Claudia Harris arrived later carrying groceries. The moment she saw Elena crying, she understood. You told him. Elena nodded weakly. And now I probably scared him away. Claudia sat beside her. Elena, stop apologizing for being a mother. But Elena's fear ran deeper than that. Every relationship after Felton ended the same way. Men liked her until they realized she came with responsibility. Pain. History. A child. Days passed before Dylan finally called. I'd like to see you again. Elena looked stunned. Really? I'm scared too, Dylan admitted quietly. That honesty changed everything. A few days later they met at a park with both children. Haley ran happily toward the playground. Luke stayed hidden behind Elena's leg. Haley noticed immediately. Instead of forcing conversation, she offered him a cookie. Luke accepted it shyly. Children understood emotions adults tried hiding. For a while, the afternoon felt peaceful. Then Felton Bracey appeared. Expensive jacket. Cold smile. Instant tension. Elena's face strained of color. Luke grabbed her arm tightly. Felton looked directly at Dylan. So this is the new guy? Dylan stood carefully. You need to leave. Felton ignored Elena completely. Instead, he smirked at Dylan. You should ask her why she hides things. Elena looked panicked. Stop. But Felton kept talking. She tells everybody I abandoned them. Nearby parents started staring. Luke began shaking. Haley moved closer to Dylan nervously. Then Felton threw folded papers onto the picnic table. Court documents. Dylan looked down slowly. Custody filings. Financial disputes. Painful accusations. His stomach tightened immediately. Elena burst into tears. It's not what he's making it look like. Felton laughed coldly. You sure about that? Before we continue, tell me honestly. If you were standing in Dylan's shoes watching this happen in front of the children, would you stay or walk away? The park became painfully quiet. Luke clung tightly to Elena while tears rolled down her face. Felton looked satisfied seeing her humiliated. Then something unexpected happened. Haley stepped forward. Her little voice shook slightly as she looked at Felton. Why are you being mean to her? The question stunned everyone. Felton looked uncomfortable for the first time. Haley pointed softly toward Luke. He's scared. Dylan looked down at the little boy. Luke was trembling. Not confused. Afraid. Real fear. And suddenly Dylan understood everything. Whatever happened between Elena and Felton, Luke had been carrying emotional damage for years. Felton noticed the fear too. But instead of comforting his son, he rolled his eyes and stepped back. That told Dylan everything he needed to know. Dylan turned toward Elena. You don't owe me explanations right now. Elena stared at him in shock. You still believe me? Dylan looked at Luke before answering. Kids don't fake fear like that. Felton scoffed before walking away angrily. The second he disappeared, Luke buried his face against Elena's shoulder. Later that evening, Elena finally told Dylan the whole truth. How Felton vanished for months. How she worked double shifts to survive. How Luke cried himself to sleep asking why his father stopped loving him. Dylan listened quietly. Then he admitted something too. There were nights I sat in my car because I couldn't afford groceries. Elena looked at him with tears in her eyes. You understand. Dylan nodded slowly. For the first time, neither of them felt ashamed anymore. They simply felt seen. Before we move into the ending, I want to ask something real. If life hurt you this deeply, would you still risk trusting someone again? Share your thoughts below because many people watching know exactly how this kind of pain feels. Weeks slowly turned into months. And little by little, life began changing for both families. Not perfectly, but honestly. Haley and Luke became inseparable. Movie nights replaced lonely evenings. Saturday pancakes became family tradition. And Dylan's apartment slowly stopped feeling empty. One evening Dylan came home exhausted from work expecting silence. Instead, he heard laughter in the kitchen. Smoke filled the room while Elena, Luke, and Haley completely ruined grilled cheese sandwiches together. The scene was messy. Chaotic. Beautiful. Dylan stood there smiling quietly because for the first time in years, home felt alive again. Later that night, Elena sat beside him on the couch while both children slept nearby. "I forgot what peace felt like," she whispered. Dylan understood completely. Months earlier, both of them believed love belonged to people with easier lives. Cleaner stories. Less pain. But somehow they found comfort in each other's brokenness. One afternoon Elena handed Dylan a folded note before work. Inside were simple words. "Thank you for staying." Dylan stared at the paper for several seconds. Nobody had ever thanked him for surviving before. He pulled Elena into a quiet hug while tears filled her eyes again. But these tears felt different. Not fear. Relief. As rain tapped softly against the apartment windows that night, Dylan looked around at the sleeping children, scattered blankets, and half-finished snacks. And for the first time in years, he no longer felt like a man drowning alone. He finally felt home again. Some people believe healing happens all at once. But for Dylan Matthew and Elena Bracey, healing came slowly. Through exhausted conversations after work. Through grocery trips with two laughing children. Through honest confessions during painful nights. And through the simple decision to stop carrying everything alone. Neither of them expected love when they walked into that restaurant. They were just two tired parents trying to survive life. But sometimes broken people recognize each other in ways nobody else can understand. That was the real heart of this story. Dylan did not rescue Elena. And Elena did not rescue Dylan. They simply reminded each other that struggling alone was no longer their only option. Single parents carry invisible weight every day. The bills. The pressure. The guilt. The fear of failing their children. And the silent loneliness after everyone else falls asleep. Maybe that's why stories like this hit so deeply. Because somewhere tonight, another parent is sitting quietly wondering if anyone could ever understand their pain again. And the answer is yes. Sometimes the people who understand us best are the ones carrying the same scars. To every single parent watching right now, this message is for you. Even on your worst days, you are still showing up. You are still fighting. And that matters more than you realize. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like. And if you are a single parent, or someone raised by one, share your story below in the comments. Your words might encourage somebody who feels completely alone tonight. Also tell me honestly. What moment hit you hardest? Elena's confession at the restaurant? Luke trembling in fear at the park? Or Dylan finally realizing home could feel warm again? I read every single comment. And if you want more emotional stories about healing, love, struggle, and second chances, subscribe to The Redeemed Single Dad. Thank you for being here. And remember this. Even wounded hearts still deserve happiness.